Mick is the founding editor of the Northern Irish politics blog Sluggerole Tool. Is that your pseudonym?
That'll do. That'll do. It's not just me. I have a whole team of them there. So,
okay. How concerned are you, Mick, about this, the government, the British government doing a deal with one party in Northern Ireland to keep them in power? How much trouble could, or maybe everybody will be fine with it. I don't know.
Well, no, I don't think there's too much trouble involved in this. I mean, one of the things that I think most of your listeners will not have noticed happening is that local government or regional government in Northern Ireland, unlike Scotland and Wales, collapsed last January when Sinn Féin just walked out and basically said, we're not coming back until you change your leader.
Well, I think they had a fair point, didn't they? Because of the sort of, well, if you'll excuse the expression, the cock-up that was caused.
The RHI cock-up, yeah, that was a bit of a scandal. But the truth is, Sinn Féin knew all about that for about a year beforehand. So they also will have a very good idea of what the public inquiry will say. And my estimation is that it'll say a bit of a mess-up, fairly minor. Most of the big figures that were being talked about were scaled up because it was over a 20-year period. Really, I think it's more likely that Sinn Féin walked out because they knew Martin McGuinness was pretty well terminally ill and didn't really have someone of his caliber that they could replace.
But hang on just a minute, Mick, or Slugger if you prefer. We're getting back to sectarianism in Northern Ireland, and I know you'll say no, we're not, but. You know, what do you do?
Yes, we are. We are indeed.
Well, because what is the answer? I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day from, I think it was from the DUP we were talking, and they said, oh, well, it's up to them, we don't want trouble, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, you know, in a conflict, sadly, eventually there has to be negotiation, or there is never going to be any answer unless one side wipes the other side out. And we've had peace in Northern Ireland now for a long time. A lot of people listening to this won't even remember the Troubles.
No, that's true. I mean, we're really almost 20 years since the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah.
Was signed. There are people in their 20s now. There's a great review by Jay Rayner of a great restaurant in my hometown, basically saying that, you know, the food's great, but the politics stink. And I think he's absolutely got that one spot on. So how do we get beyond it? I think the problem is we've had 2 elections in the last 3 months. The 2 parties that have won out are the 2 most sectarian parties, or the most the parties that their respective tribes trust and respect the most to keep the other one at bay. So what's the answer? Well, there is no easy answer to this. I think we've had 20 years so far of peace. That's been the major achievement of the Good Friday Agreement, not going back to war. Pushing further on, what Northern Ireland needs is for people to refocus on things like health, schools, all the things that were really at play in the election, the Westminster election and the rest of the United Kingdom. And to do that, in some respects, the DUP is bidding for more budget, not for sectarian projects, but for things like infrastructure, roads, schools, a health service that has been in Northern Ireland. We've had 3 health ministers, or 3 parties in charge of health, and each one of them has failed because the budgets are just far too small to do any reform, never mind just keep employing nurses and keeping the trolley numbers down at A&E. So perhaps, and I say this really advisedly, perhaps there is a possibility that with the kickstart of some money, we actually might see a re-engagement of normal politics, after a successful negotiation.
All right. How concerned, Mick, are you about what could happen in the future because of the Brexit situation?
Now, Brexit. I mean, personally speaking, I voted Remain in the referendum last year.
Well, most sensible people did.
Well, a lot of people did, But I also understand I also understand what some of the more sane Brexiteers were pitching for. Freedom to kind of strike trade deals quickly, getting frustrated with the length of time it takes the European bureaucracy to do these things, and creating new opportunities, particularly in a place like Northern Ireland, which is right on the edge of the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland does very well, but it only does very well at a huge subsidy into the public sector. Something like 70% of all money spent in Northern Ireland originates with public sector income. Mm. However, the difficulty is that it has created a kind of an instability around this and an opportunity for people to play mischief. It has the potential to create some resentment at the sort of after effect that it has on the economy of the Republic of Ireland, whose prosperity has been a vital ingredient to helping the peace process heal some very long and deep historical wounds.
Do you think there is ever no, I better not ask you that. Well, I'm going to ask it anyway.
Go on.
Is there ever likely to be a time that you can see when Ireland will reunite?
I think it's possible. I think it's eminently possible, but it's very deeply problematic. It's more problematic than Scottish independence because you've got to do two things. One, you have to get a consensus, and I mean more than just 50% plus one other person. You have broad consensus of somewhere between 60 and 70% of the population, which we're a long way away from, just to leave the United Kingdom. But in that prospect, you've got to also make it look like it's a possibility that you can join these two parts of the island that have been pretty much apart for nearly 200 years come 2022. And that requires a different approach to the one that we've got at the moment. Republicanism in Northern Ireland tends to push the tribal buttons in order to remind everybody what the project is about. The problem is that alienates everybody else who isn't totally bought into that project. So we need I think, for that to happen, Irish Republicans in particular need to change their view of who their unionist neighbours are. Are they interlopers from Britain who've simply been living there for 400 years? Or are they prospective Irish citizens whom you want to charm and you want to pull in to the wider project? And I think at the moment in the post-conflict era, too much of our politics is conditioned by the condition of low-level, dirty war. And in other words, there's very little trust cutting across those two groups.
Do you think, I remember I was working on a radio station briefly in Chicago, which is very Irish, of course, as you probably know.
Yeah.
And did accuse an American caller of being quite happy with funding a terrorist organisation within the United Kingdom. I had no idea what I was talking about, so I made it quite simple so even the Americans could understand, and they got very upset. Is there still interference from outside, particularly from parts of America?
Interference is too strong a word. I mean, I wouldn't compare it to, back in the day when, Boston and Chicago, certain parts of New York were full of fundraisers looking to buy guns to push into the conflict. We're nowhere near that anymore. But it is true that some of the funding rules around Northern Ireland allow for dark money to be channeled in, and a huge amount of money, I think, is still being pushed back from America, particularly towards Sinn Féin. However, I mean, that may be something, a channel that has to be closed to kind of create that broader sense of trust, but I wouldn't call it interference. I think it's been traditionally part of the landscape. And it's certainly not subversive in the way that it once was.
And are you happy in your own mind that we can't slip back to the old way? I spent a lot of time in the 90s. My television show I had in the 90s, you may or may not be old enough to remember, but I spent a long time coming over to Northern Ireland and doing the show live from over there. Because I suppose at the time a lot of people watched television more over there because they didn't go out very often in the evenings. And I did a programme once driving around the coast of Northern Ireland, the North Antrim coast and around there, and just think what a beautiful place this is. What a and it's totally different to the Republic of Ireland. There's great country all over the island of Ireland, if you like. But of course, nobody from Britain really went over for a holiday or a weekend or anything. Has it improved?
Oh, it has massively improved. I mean, look, the vast majority of people go into Ireland for weekends or hen, stag do's, all the rest of it, are all going to the south. They tend to go to Dublin. Mm. But increasingly, you know, one of the big booming trades in Belfast has been the tour bus that will take you round some of the areas where the conflict was at its worst.
Oh, gosh.
But it's also exploring some of Belfast's, you know, mercantile past, you know, and various other kind of things associated with the Scottish Enlightenment by extension. Mm. So Northern Ireland is beginning to attract numbers, and in a sense, there is a worry that not that we will go back immediately. I think anybody who has a living memory of the Troubles, particularly those protagonists who spent nearly a generation themselves involved in this conflict, has absolutely no appetite. There is no, you know, the whole of Irish history, there is no conflict that has gone on as long, as deep, and as dirty as the Troubles of 1969.
Do you? Sorry, Mick. Do you see that the problems with the border that are going to happen? I'm told, I was talking to MP earlier who said no, they'll be fine. No, there's not going to be a hard border. We've already been assured.
Yeah.
But I can't actually see how that's going to work. In Ireland, there are. Well, for argument's sake, there are farms with fields and cattle, half in the Republic and half in Northern Ireland. What's going to happen?
Well, I mean, look, most of that, James, is subject to agreement between the UK and the European Union. And of course, I think we're probably in agreement on this. There have been very, very many glib assumptions made on the British side about how flexible and reasonable the European Union is going to be towards a party that has unilaterally decided to just withdraw from all the benefits. However, I think there are arrangements that will, certainly on a local basis, those farms that you're talking about that have fields on one side. I mean, I can think of one particular famous farm in South Armagh where you walk in the front door in Northern Ireland, and when you walk out the back door, you're in the Republic. You know, I think...
Don't build a wall through there.
No, well, knowing the particular farmer in question, he wouldn't allow it, and the authorities would not even try it.
Yeah.
But you know, the truth is, there are existent arrangements between, say, Poland and Ukraine, where small-scale trading is exempt from some of the bigger stuff, as long as it's like just milk going from one side to the other to a specific creamery, etc. I think also enforcement of migration and trade and tariffs and all the rest of it is likely to take place under the Home Office aegis. So if you're stopped, you're not going to be stopped at the border. Frankly, you'd just be setting up a target for the next generation of IRA people. And so there is no way that anybody in the state wants that to happen. I think it'll happen through internal reinforcement. The biggest danger to Northern Ireland is that it doesn't transition into peacetime politics, and that it doesn't make North-South cooperation a meaningful and ongoing developing part of its identity. I think that's critical for carrying Republicans forward into a more peaceful period, and one where they have a legitimate expectation that they might one day see the island reunited.
I mean, I've worked both in Northern Ireland and in the Republic. I worked for a radio station once called Atlantic 252, who were based, of course, in Dublin. And the people that I've met both sides of the border just want to get on with their lives. Just want to get on with their lives. They're happy where they live. They just want to get on with their lives, and everybody to leave them alone.
Absolutely. And in many respects, the political classes in Northern Ireland particularly, I think the Republic has less of a problem in this regard. The politicians, in a way, in Northern Ireland, are just playing out the game they know, but it's not the game that's being played by their electorate, by and large. Strangely, and I think this lays Northern Ireland out as a very weird place. In most places, the working class are not the ones who get listened to. It's the middle class. A former Labour councillor once said about 15 years ago, he said the trouble with Northern Ireland's political class is they all went off to play golf in 1969 and they've never come back. Now, I think that's a slight exaggeration. But, the moderating voice of the middle simply has no effect. The large controversies, you see it on Slugger, all around bonfires and tribal identity and flags. And, and John Hume's father once famously said to him when he was a boy, listen, son, the flag might be important, but you can't eat one,
Yeah. Well, listen, I love Ireland. I love the people on both sides of the border. And it's just a shame that there is this kind of, in a very small part of the population, if you like, this sort of ingrained suspicion would be a better way of looking at it, wouldn't it, really?
Yeah, suspicion, lack of trust, unwillingness to move out of certainty, all of those things.
Yeah. Well, listen, I just saw you talking on Sky News as well. You've been multimedia broadcasting today. Mick, good to talk. Thank you very much indeed for your time.